your business feels like it's unpredictable, then 9 times out of 10, you're not strategic planning. You got to know your revenue goal for the year. And what most people do is they define it for the year, but then they don't take the extra steps to actually then break it down so that way they have a clear pathway of what it's going to look like in their business. So I wanted to take time to be able to actually break down what is strategic planning and actually give you an example of a mini strategic planning process that you could actually be doing in your business. Welcome back to another episode of the Seven Figure Educator Podcast. My name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas. I'm a former teacher, former school principal, Harvard grad, now turned full-time entrepreneur. And I help people just like you who used to be where I was working in a school or school district to become millionaires. And so during this podcast episode, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics of strategic planning. And the reason why I wanted to make this a topic of an episode is because there's a lot of chatter right now happening in the marketplace, just in terms of customer buying decisions taking longer, that business might be feeling harder for a lot of entrepreneurs. And I'm not saying that those things aren't true. What I am saying is that if your business feels like it's unpredictable, then 9 times out of 10, you're not strategic planning. So I wanted to take time to be able to actually break down what is strategic planning and actually give you an example of a mini strategic planning process that you could actually be doing in your business. So let's first create some common language and actually define what is strategic planning. So I have a definition here that I think is really, really helpful. It comes from Harvard Business School that we'll use as some common language for us around what actually strategic planning is. So Harvard Business School defines strategic planning as the ongoing organizational process of using available knowledge to document a business's intended direction. This process is used to prioritize efforts, effectively allocate resources, align stakeholders and employees, and ensure organizational goals are backed by data and sound reasoning. So I like to think of strategic planning as it helps you define your North Star. It helps you determine the priorities, and then once you have those priorities identified, it's all missions are focused on meeting those priorities. So if you do not have a North Star in your business, well then that's what I'm going to help you break down during this episode. So oftentimes when we talk about a North Star in business, one of the most meaningful North Star, particularly as a for-profit business, is revenue. Like, you got to know your revenue goal for the year. And what most people do is they define it for the year, but then they don't take the extra steps to actually then break it down so that way they have a clear pathway of what it's going to look like in their business. So I want to model for you what this will look like. And this is kind of a little bit of a crash course of what your strategic planning should look like in your business. Hey, y'all, I want to take a quick moment to pop in. I know the episode's getting really, really juicy, but I could not miss the opportunity to make sure that you know that we are headed to Atlanta October 3rd through 5th for Seven Figure Educator Live. This is my 3-day live event. It is the only 3-day live event for education consultants who are out here making a big impact and getting a big bank. And even if you feel like your bank ain't that big yet, I want you in the room because that's how your bank gets bigger, okay? I have curated a very special 3-day agenda that includes powerhouse speakers, 7, 8, 9-figure speakers, intentional networking to find your people, to find your next opportunity. Y'all, we're getting ready to take the city over, and we're taking it over at a 5-star property, okay? Meet me in Atlanta, October 3rd through 5th. Grab your ticket by heading to sevenfigureeducator.com. I'll link it in the show notes, and I'll see you there. So when we're thinking about North Star, when we're thinking about revenue, the first step is, okay, well, what do you want your revenue goal to be for the year? So we're first going to think at the annual level. We're going to think 365 days. How much money do you want to make over the next year? So the first step from an annual planning process, we're thinking about our annual revenue goal. So for the sake of easy numbers, let's start with 100K. So if your goal for the year is your first 6 figures, 100K, we've set that now as the annual goal. And that's where most people stop, which is one of the most common mistakes that entrepreneurs make is they just set a goal 365 days. And that's such a far runway that what ends up happening is they underestimate the level of urgency needed because now they've set the target a whole year out. So when it comes to strategic planning, you want to take your annual goal and then you want to break it down into the next level and thinking through by the quarter. And you also want to think about by month. So here are two ways that I think about this. Anytime it comes from an annual goal, I always break that down by month. And there's certain numbers that I just have etched in my brain. Like I will never forget them. I eat, breathe, and sleep them. For me, one of those numbers is monthly revenue goal. So if we're talking about 100K as your annual revenue goal, you need to know that like the back of your hand, what that breaks down per month and what that breaks down for a quarter. And it's just some simple basic math. This is why we can't say we aren't math people. This is very, very basic math that we're doing here. So 100K breaks down to $8,333 per month. If we were to multiply that by 3, we would get our quarterly goal, which is about $25,000. So those are the numbers that are going to be driving our planning. So now the question becomes, well, what do you actually need to do to be bringing in $8,333 every single month? So when we enter into this conversation, this is where, and again, we're doing some very light kind of strategic planning because we can get into lots of details and lots of nicks and crannies, but I'm going to kind of keep a surface level to be able to show you an example of the process. But also I want to show you of how this is going to start giving you some feedback on your pricing when we're talking through strategic planning. So if we're shooting for our first goal or our goal for the year being our first 6-figure year, and that breaks down to $25,000 per quarter, that breaks down to $8,333 per month. The question becomes, okay, well, what are your offers? How much are they priced? And how many offers do you need to sell per month in order to make that goal? So let's say that you have an offer that is, let's say your offer is 1K. If your offer is 1K and you have a monthly target of $8,333, well, you need at least 9 clients in order to hit that goal. And this is the conversation we have with a lot of clients in our community to help kind of reflect back. Well, from a pricing standpoint, there's a whole pricing strategy that we teach of being able to run your numbers. But sometimes you can just see on the surface level when you're priced too low. And this is one of those examples of you need 9 clients in a month in order to hit $8,333. And for many folks in this stage of business, they're still working a 9 to 5. So it's like, yo, you need 9 clients on top of working your 9 to 5. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm saying that's a lot of hard work, which is probably why 6 figures feels hard. And when I'm having 7-figure conversations, it's hard for you to wrap your mind around that because you're like, yo, like, I need to 10x the number of clients. So now I need 90 clients in order to get to 7 figures. Well, you could just increase your price. So let's say you increase your price to 3K. At 3K, well, we only need now 3 clients per month, which that could roughly be a client a weekend, right? If you're still working a 9 to 5, if you do professional development, if you do trainings, you do workshops, 1 day a week, right? Or we could even increase our price to the point of, let's say it's 5K. At 5K, we just need 2 clients. And what we always push our clients to consider, and pricing is a journey, it's not a destination, but what we eventually want to get you to is we want to get you to having a core service that is actually a 5-figure offer. And it is not a stretch to be thinking of a 5-figure offer. It might sound like a lot of money, but as a for-profit business, you should have a 5-figure offer. So if your offer is 10K, you now only need 1 client per month. Now think about that level of work. Now we have some options here. Would you prefer to have 1 client a month? Would you prefer to have 9 clients a month? which one feels more attractive to you, right? What level of work, when you think about your capacity, when you think about your time, these are the types of questions that you start to ask to be able to then narrow down, okay, how do I now create a strategy that then points all of my resources, points all of my energy, time, and attention towards this goal? So one of the takeaways that if you haven't been able to capture, I want you to capture now is, hey there, I'm popping in really quickly to make sure that you knew about my 7-Figure Business School. It doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, I teach live for 5 days straight. Baby, I'm still a teacher at heart, and it gives me so much joy to teach about the foundations of a 7-figure business. During the 5 days, I'll teach you how to package your offers, I'll teach you pricing, I'll teach you $1 million sales that aren't salesy, and I'll teach you how to find folks to go and pitch your offers to immediately. So do not wait. Go ahead, head to the show notes, and I want you to click the link to sign up for our next business school. I'll see you there. You need to A, have a revenue goal for the year, and then B, you need to take that revenue goal and break it down by quarter, then break it down by month, and then C, I want you to, once you have that monthly goal, then determine how many clients do you need given your offer. And if you need to make adjustments given your price point, this is a great opportunity to do so. Run your numbers, see how much it costs to be able to deliver that offer. But this is the great opportunity to start making some pricing adjustments to actually be able to put that goal in perspective. So this is a really, really high level of what strategic planning could look like in your business or should look like in your business, of how do you take a goal for the year, break it down by quarter, by month, then be able to determine how many clients do you need. And then from there, it's a matter of figuring out that strategy. Okay, so once we have this clarity of how many clients we need, then the next step is being able to figure out what is your strategy to actually be able to get those clients. So I'm going to stay really high level for the sake of our time together to give you a model of what this looks like. There's some deeper nuances that we go into more depth with our clients, but I just want to show you kind of a basic example. So let's zoom in on this 10K offer that you need one client per month. Because, I love living in a world where we have a 5K offer, right? So let's zoom in there. And if we need one client per month, now we want to be able to zoom up and to consider, okay, if we need one client per month, how many prospects do we need to be talking to, meaning people who are qualified for the service? And typically a prospect, we're engaging with them on a sales call. So how many sales calls do we need to have in order to get us to one client? So one way to be thinking about this is a term called conversion rates, of how many prospects can you convert to become clients. And so a healthy conversion rate that we'll plan around a 20% conversion rate. So if you have a conversion rate, meaning 20% of the people that you talk to end up becoming a client, that means that you're going to need 5 calls. So roughly 5 calls out of the month, 20% of those 5 calls pops to become that 10K client, 20% conversion. You got to have 5 calls, which means you roughly need about 1 call a week. And what that could look like from a timing standpoint, a planning standpoint, is, all right, where are you going to get the 5 calls from? How are you going to find the 5 people to be able to book a call? Are you going to present at a conference? Are you going to reach out to people in your network? Are you going to go to LinkedIn and start pitching people? Now the strategy becomes, the focus is, all right, in order to get to my $8,333 per month, I got to sell 1 client. And in order to get 1 client with a 20% conversion, I got to book at least 5 calls this month. Now I got to go after those 5 calls and book those 5 calls, which is roughly about 1 to 2 calls per week. So this is an example at a really, really high level of what strategic planning looks like, because now I can start turning this into a weekly focus. Well, now my weekly focus is focused on booking calls, where I need to get 1 to 2 calls this week. So how many pieces of communication do I need to send out in order to land to 1 to 2 calls? I would then start to plan through potentially at least 20 to 30 pitches per week, at least. in order to land a 1 to 2 calls, because that's giving us about a 10% conversion rate from pitches to calls. So that's where I would start to focus my time on the weekly level. So from this episode, you should have a few action steps to then be able to go and apply to your business. And the headline that I hope is really clear throughout kind of this model is that your business should not be unpredictable. If your business is unpredictable, that means you either haven't defined your North Star. Your North Star is too big, meaning you might just have a revenue goal for the year, but you haven't actually scoped it back to a quarter or per month, and or you don't have the clarity around your numbers of how many people do you need to talk to get to your client goal and being able to monitor that per week. And so if you have additional questions, would love to be able to continue to engage with you. So click the link below in our show notes to be able to join our Facebook group, and we would love to meet you over there and continue to dialogue. Until next time.